what's the origin of America First? This, as far as I know, this was not pointed out in any of the corporate media, which also has a lot to answer for in terms of giving literally billions of dollars of free airtime to the great prevaricator in the White House. And that continues. And this is perfectly in line with what Joseph Goebbels, who was Hitler's Minister for Propaganda, actually his actual title was Minister for Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. I know, it's Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. And you know what he said in the early 30s, before the Nazis really took power? He said, the main thing is they are talking about us. That was the main thing. And every day we see, and I was just, watching the afternoon talk shows and morning talk shows, it's all about him, his latest outrageous comment, his latest, slander of this or that person, his latest incredibly, sexist remark, racist remarks, calling women dogs and horse faces and telling, members of Congress that they're, Pocahontas, or they're have low IQ, or LeBron James, the basketball star, having a low IQ. It's really amazing that this kind of rhetoric is given so much attention, and it's why do people turn to demagogic impulses or demagogic tendencies, which are so prevalent right now. And propaganda is certainly part of it. And I spend a good deal of time looking at some of these right-wing sites, because we have to know what they're saying. What well are they drinking water from? So if you look at Newsmax and the Drudge Report and Red State and Breitbart News and InfoWars and Fox and Tablet and AltRight.com and all of these other extreme right-wing websites, you have an understanding of what people are feeding on and why then they regurgitate what is coming out of Rush Limbaugh's mouth, or Sean Hannity, or Ann Coulter. I mean, again, it's stunning that people like this, like Hannity, like Coulter, like Limbaugh, have such influence over state policy. As Goebbels said, and Hitler as well, I'm paraphrasing both of them, with constant repetition, we can convince people that heaven is hell and hell is heaven. It's just a matter of repeating the line over and over again. And Goebbels said, I can convince people that a circle is a square and a square is a circle. These are mere words that can be molded, and we intend to mold them. So understanding propaganda is absolutely central to liberating ourselves, but also learning about what other people are being exposed to in terms of their information. Now, yesterday happened to be the national holiday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was born actually on January 15th. And we had I would say, the usual kind of celebration of Dr. King. I Have a Dream speech is often played, but King himself underwent a remarkable transformation in the years following his I Have a Dream speech, and that Dr. King has been largely occluded from view, largely blocked out of history. But that King moved from a strictly race analysis of the ills of American society to start talking about imperialism, about military aggression, about the unfairness of a capitalist system that concentrates wealth in the hands of very few. If you look back at his Riverside Church speech, April 4th, 1967, where he broke his silence on Vietnam, and every time he says the word Vietnam, if you put in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Egypt, Somalia, and other countries, you don't miss a beat, because the U.S. has not changed actually that much since he made that particular speech, in which he said the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is the United States. and he condemned the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism. This took quite a bit of courage on King's part. No one counseled him to make this particular speech, but he felt morally obligated to break his silence. And there was a remarkable op-ed, and hats off to Michelle Alexander, author of The New Jim Crow. I don't know if you saw her op-ed in Sunday's News of the Week of the New York Times, in which she said, "It is time for me to break a different kind of silence," reviewing the King record on Vietnam, and then talking about her silence on Palestine and how this was an important moral and human rights issue, and that she had been reluctant to talk about because of cultural pressures and for other reasons. It's certainly worth looking at, and she's become, I think, a regular op-ed columnist for the Times. But getting back to Dr. King, he's been shrink-wrapped and formatted to be innocuous and non-threatening. So there are dream speeches, desegregation, sit-ins, voting rights, Selma marches. All of those things could be accommodated. But when he started talking about the system, about structural violence of the system, then he became a danger to the establishment. And in New York at the Riverside Church speech, he said that Vietnam was a symptom of a far deeper malady. And then he added, "We as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring." By giving that speech, Martin Luther King essentially signed his own death warrant, and he was murdered exactly a year to the day after the Riverside Church speech on April 4th, 1968, on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, where he had gone to, in solidarity with striking sanitation workers in Memphis, and he was about to go to Washington to take part in the Poor People's campaign. Poverty continues to be endemic, particularly among African Americans. In some ways, Martin Luther King was murdered twice, not just on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, but in killing his revolutionary message. He's been, all those rough, sharp edges have been kind of sandpapered over, and so he becomes a non-threatening figure, which, allows even the tweeter-in-chief and his chief butler to go to the King monument and lay a wreath and mumble a few words about Dr. King. King called for a radical redistribution of an economic and political power, a revolution of values. We must see now that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together. The whole structure of American life must be changed. These are words of prophecy that I believe resonate today, and that we need to be talking about, not just getting lost in the media kind of fabricated vision of Dr. King, which is very unthreatening. We are, though, as Eliot says in Four Quartets, distracted from distractions by distraction. There's so many demands on our eyes and our ears. The internet in some ways and the iPhone and the Androids have become an enormous consumer of our time and our attention. And I'm not against that, but if it's at the expense of engagement and activism, then it's producing, I think, negative effects.